What's up, you guys? How's everybody doing? I apologize for that we are a little tardy for the party. My co-host is on his way. He'll be here momentarily. But I just want to say good afternoon to everybody. I wanted to respect everyone's time because we really appreciate you all being here. Yeah, I know, Abby. I know you playing double duty right now. I know. Hey, Nappy Child, how you doing, babes? I ain't seen you in a while, girl. Well, I mean, I seen you in El Teddy's chat. You know what I'm saying. How's everybody doing? So, we will wait for our co-host to get here, but in the meantime and in between time, I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed. We are growing slowly but steady, but we are growing. And with that being said, today we're going to talk to you guys about where we are with the school reopening project, and everything that's going on with the school reopening. I've gotten some reports in different areas. Hold on. Lord, it's always my fault when El Teddy is late. It is always my fault. I sent him the wrong link, y'all. He was over in my chat for my live later on the night, waiting for me. Anyway, hey Sylvia, hey Shakira, caramel kisses. Welcome everyone to the room. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I appreciate everybody for being here. Listen, all I can say is, I'm sorry. Look, trying to do too much, too fast, too soon. All right, give me the thumbs up when you're ready, sir. Hello, how are you? Be quiet.
I'm trying to make it like it was me.
No, I just admitted that it wasn't you. I just admitted it was me. I just admitted it was me. So how are you doing today, sir? I saw you were
I'm
cutting up a
great.
little earlier. You were cutting up a little bit.
Me?
You.
Little?
Yes, sir, you. Yes, yes, sir, you. I saw you were, so I was like, okay, I said I guess he killing time till we get there.
Yeah, I was killing time and I got off in enough time.
You did, and I see some of your people
And you were
coming
not
over.
you were not there.
Listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, at least you can't say you don't have a link for tonight. You say, well, it is Friday though. You said I
If
always
you
let
let me on. If you let me on.
you said I only let you on Fridays.
Mhm. I might get on today.
Don't do that.
Hey everybody.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know that. I think that was me.
No, that's my internet.
Okay.
It's been real sketchy.
Yeah, mine has been acting up today too. So maybe it's just a combination of the
Maybe it's
two.
Comcast and their level brand of foolery.
Yeah, because I that's who I have too is Comcast. So yeah, I guess that's who it is then. So how have you been? It's been about 2 weeks. So how are things going in the adult education side of things? How are you doing?
I've been doing Hawaii all week and areas like Guam and in this Pacific. So I've been having late nights, but it's been cool.
Yeah, that's been giving you more time to be on here during the day cutting up though.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So you listen. It's been a very interesting thing trying to navigate the normal day to day functioning of a school from your living room. It's a lot. It is a lot. And it ain't easy.
I do have a question for you,
What's up?
and maybe this goes into everything. So in my home area, I told you how Broward County, the next county over from Miami-Dade County, sixth largest school district in this country, they have made it a point to say that they're going back to face-to-face classes on October 5th, the week of October 5th, which is 2 weeks. We got the next, I should say. And there's so much politically involved with that because the week of October 5th is the start of FTE. And FTE is that that period of time is a 10-day period where they take a snapshot of every school within the state to see how many students actually are not just enrolled, but actually sitting in a classroom. And that's how you get credit for, okay, this school has, and that's the week during the, and if you are from certain areas, you know, that's the week where they tell you they do all kinds of things, have little incentives for students to make sure they're in school during that week. They'll even tell us teachers, make sure you have some kind of important test or an assignment due that week to kind of make sure the students are there, because that's when the state takes your state board of education or whatever will take their snapshot across that the state to see who's actually sitting in a classroom, and then they'll start to allocate funds. So it seems to me that they're playing politics with people's
lives
and lives, because now you're more hell-bent on making sure that you get credit for these kids sitting in the class, perhaps with the safety and well-being. Now, I say that to say this: the superintendent of schools of the Broward County schools is Black and a man, and is liberal aligned. So I don't want you all to think or to be confused and to think that this is relegated to one side of the aisle. This is all money, money reigns supreme in all of this. And so I don't know whether or not in your area or surrounding areas, whether or not you've started to see things like that. I don't know when you all have you all's validity and accountability period in your respective areas, but I don't know if you had started to see things like that as well.
Well, I have seen it around the country. Here, the closest district that I know of, and somebody who lives in the area may know differently, the closest district that I know of is Fairfax County Schools. They are supposed to go back in October. Don't have the exact date, but they're supposed to go back in October. Some of the counties in Maryland, but they're on the red part of the state, I would say. And I know this is not making it political, I'm just saying they're closer to like Pennsylvania. They're going outside, like in the more rural areas of Maryland. Those counties they're not opening back up for students, but they're opening back up for teachers, which is only the stepping stone for them to let the kids back in. And they've already said, I was looking at a news report on Wednesday, and they've already said that teachers can opt out if they have a medical issue, but they cannot opt out if someone in their household has a medical issue. And they are already seeing resignations, and they're already talking about how there's going to be a shortage. And I'm like, well, duh. Like, you're telling me that if my husband is sick, I can't opt out. Well, then what you're telling me is I got to make a decision between my job and my family. That's what you're telling me. So, yeah. But as far as now they just said something yesterday that the governor of Maryland has just cleared fall sports to start next month. And I'm thinking, so we're not ready to go back into a classroom, but y'all ready to play sports? Really? Really? That makes sense to somebody? So but I do notice around the country, I am seeing school districts. I know in North Carolina, they've announced a plan to start going back. I don't have the dates in front of me. I think Abby sent us the breakdown in the group chat, but I don't have the dates in front of me right now. But I know, and a friend of mine teaches in North Carolina, and she's like, she's scared. She's like,
I kind of saw the fall sports happening. I think they wanted to wait to see from the NFL level to the NCAA level and let that trickle down to the high school level. And I feel like they saw, okay, if they can do it, then perhaps we can do it. Mind you, that the numbers go up exponentially on at each level. The NFL roster carries about what 53-man roster, whereas a college roster may have 100 uh, students on that roster. A high school roster could also have, depending equal amount of numbers, depending on the district or whatnot. And so I felt like they were waiting with regard to school sports to see. Let's see how the NFL does. Oh, the NFL's okay. All right, let's see how NCAA does. Oh, because even the Big Ten and the Pac-12, which at first said that they would not be playing football or fall sports this fall, have backpedaled on that, and they have started to say, okay, we could see a date for us reopening fall sports. So I kind of saw that coming on the high school level because it's big money, especially when you start to talk about some states like a Texas or Florida, where there are high school football games whose revenue dwarfs college games in some of these larger states where high school sports reign supreme. So like I said earlier, money is going to be the agent with which a lot of moves are made within the education sector. A lot of money.
Yeah. And I mean, like the college level, I get the college level. But on the high school level, I'm like, really? It's not that serious. Like, especially Maryland is not a college state. That's not to say that we don't have athletes, college athletes, but it's not like Texas. It's not like Friday Night Lights here. You know what I'm saying? And so I just feel like you are pressing to go back in a situation where you don't even have protocols in place for the kids to go to school every day, but you are going to put protocols in place for a locker room, for practice, for a game, for people coming into the stands. You know what I'm saying? So
part of that is like we have parents, many of which are in our chats or maybe watching our replay, who said, oh, you need to keep my child out of school. I'm worried about my child's safety. On the other side of the position, you also have those parents that say, listen, my child is a senior and I need for him to get this scholarship to whatever school, and I need as many eyes on him as I can, and this is our ticket to getting my child into college via whatever athletic scholarship. So you better believe I want my child to be able to play football or volleyball or whatever fall sports or cross country, whatever fall sports are going on, for that reason as well. So I do understand when you have district and you know how rabid some of those parents of athletes are. Those parents.
Oh, I get it. I mean, I get it. I'm just stating it for the purposes of the conversation. I definitely understand the motivation behind it. All I'm saying is, once again, we prove as a country where our priorities are.
Exactly.
Once again, because again, you're not working that hard to figure out how I can safely go back to school, which we've already established there really isn't a safe way to happen. But you're willing to risk, and the parents are too, because there wouldn't be a push forward if the parents weren't pushing it.
Exactly.
I mean, we saw, what was it, the Big Ten, where the parents sued the Big Ten over their kids not playing football.
And I think, and I say this especially to my parents of color, they don't sometimes understand the power that they wield, the power that they have. Parents are the most powerful entity in all of education. They're more powerful than the politicians, than the educators, than the students. Parents have way more power than they give themselves credit for. And I think they give away their power, they end up coalescing to the beliefs and thoughts of other parents who are not afraid to throw around their weight.
Well, and here's the reality. I think parents do realize their power. I think they don't understand I don't think they understand that it's power. I don't know how to word what I'm thinking. And what I mean by that is the same parents that will go down to the school board, complain, picket, whatever, that same power exists in other areas of the school system. So I think, yeah, they know their power when it's something that's important to them. That same parent that'll go down when their child got suspended for starting a fight, that's the same power that you yield as a parent when you feel like your kid isn't getting the education that they deserve, or you feel like that your kid isn't getting the support that you see what I'm saying? So they know the power. They just choose to use it, not always use it effectively. Maybe that's the best way I could put that. So let me read a couple of these comments. So to answer your question, young, rich, skinny dog, my best suggestion for you as far as wanting to go back to school, but you don't want the debt, is look for grants. That's the only thing. Look for scholarships and grants. There are a lot of them out there. You got to do the work, but they're out there. That's the only thing I can say is look for some programs, look for some grants. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. Jessica said that Seattle, Washington school districts are polling parents to see if they if they reopen, would they bring their kids to school, but will continue to offer remote learning. So they're going to give you guys the option. Okay. If there was enough. Quintessential said, when I saw the hoopla for Deion Sanders coaching at JSU, I knew they were going to trickle down to high school for sports. Well, I mean, look at the NFL. I mean, the NFL never questioned whether they were going to have.
They never.
That was never an issue.
Never wavered. It was
never an issue.
No.
Remember, the NFL is the only sport that hasn't been affected. I mean, prior to this, hockey had to shut down, baseball had to shut down, basketball had to shut down. The season was over for football. The Super Bowl had already happened. So, yeah, I mean, training camp was affected and things like that. And preseason. But
they still are losing money with regard to fans.
They're losing money on they're definitely losing money on the other side now. But what I mean is, prior to this, they weren't affected the same way these other sports have been affected, and how they, like the NFL, the NBA had to come up with this whole bubble situation to salvage some of their season, and the same thing with the NHL and with hockey. Like, they just didn't have that same issue. And you heard Jerry Jones say from the very beginning, he said, "Oh, we will have football, and I will have people in the stands." And Texas Stadium is one of the few stadiums that have people in the stands. So, you know. Hey, Miss Honey, how you doing, babes? Ebby was saying, Charlotte Mecklenburg start going back October the 1st, and it looks like there's a staggered schedule. Pre-K, it's for pre-K through what? 10, 12, middle school. Oh, the dates. I'm sorry. October the 12th is middle school. So pre-K starts October 1st. Middle school, October the 12th. High school is November the 2nd. Am I reading that right? No, high school is November the 29th. Middle school is November the 2nd. Okay, whatever. They going back October the 1st, child. And it looks like it's a staggered schedule. So, yeah. It'll be interesting. I'm sure, like my school district said they will revisit in December. We were out for the first semester and they will revisit in December. I believe we're going to be going back in February.
I mean, if you want, I do have my reopening in terms of person by person. Person.
No, maybe next time. I don't want to have to, if we can do that next time.
Dear God. Let me get my
right, you have to be fully lubricated when we do that. I have to give you time to have your water ready. We'll do the state by state next time, because I really think a lot of places are opening or looking at opening in October. And for most school districts that started before Labor Day, that's about first quarter, give or take, because we're going into week 5 or week 6. I think we're going into week 5. So you figure that's midway through.
I know, for example, like in the state of Florida, it's state law. You cannot start school prior to 2 weeks. The earliest you can start school is 2 weeks prior to Labor Day. So they usually every district usually tries to start around that time. The first quarter generally ends mid-October. Somewhere around because they try to get that first FTE out of the way during that first quarter. And so even if they have to push it to 10 weeks instead of 9, they will squish that in there. So they try to have, just to give you a gauge, they will try to have for a school district that starts around the middle of August, they generally in that first quarter, mid-October.
Yeah, I know. My biggest concern, and maybe this is getting ready to sound very selfish when I say this. And this is something that I've seen when I go on my little, my teachers of TikTok and my support groups on Facebook. These are the conversations that I'm hearing from teachers who are in hybrid situations. You're doing double the work because the expectation is that you're going to teach the kids who choose to come to school. You're teaching them all day long. Then for the students who choose not to come to school, now you have to turn around and you have to make sure you're doing your Google Classroom, you're updating those assignments, you're grading those assignments, and you're really doing double the work.
But not getting double the pay.
You damn sure not going to get double the pay, and you're not even going to get no kind of stipend. Like, I could even see if they said, okay, well, we need you guys to clock your hours that you're logged in after 3 o'clock, and we'll give you a stipend. Like, I know when I coached, or when I did clubs, there were stipends involved in that extra time that I spent at school and those extra time that I did those activities. Like there were stipends involved. And the hybrid is done simultaneously, Abby. But what I'm saying is, so even if you have kids that are logged in at the same time you're in the building teaching, those kids are still submitting work electronically. Those kids are still in you still have to, they can't get a physical piece of paper. You still have to do an electronic situation. And I don't think people understand how time consuming that can be, especially if I can hand for the lack of a better, if I can hand a worksheet to a kid in front of me, I can't upload a PDF. They can't I have to do a whole process to create a worksheet that can be manipulated. Like, it's a whole process. And so you legit without, and this is not even me exaggerating, and they'll tell you if I'm exaggerating, you can tell me I am, but you can legit spend up to another 2 to 3 hours after you've taught your classes all day, just making sure that all the materials are there and manipulated, and the kids can use them, and grading the work and doing attendance. Like, it's a whole different situation that you have to deal with the hybrid situation. I'm sure some are executed better than others, but it's still a lot. It's a lot.
I think that too, you have to contend with, there's a large population of the education sector of the professional educators who are just not as technologically savvy as maybe people would like them to be. And so something as simple as providing a lecture may become, for example, I'm very intellectually savvy. I will give myself that. But in the classroom, I probably use less technology than a lot of people because I like my whiteboard. I like being able to, I teach writing. And the first thing I learned about writing is, how do you teach? I used to ask my department chair, how do you teach writing? Her name was Miss Sweats. And she said, writers write. That's what they do. I said, what does that mean? She said, writers write. If you are going to teach writing, you will write. If your students are going to learn writing, they are going to write. So I'm the type of teacher. My point is, long story short, I do a lot of manipulation on the whiteboard where I do a lot of writing out for the students. As you can probably imagine, that looks very different online. That's not something, you understand what I'm saying? Whereas I could walk around the classroom and see, okay, this student is writing these notes. I can see little Johnny or little Jane over here physically writing down the notes. I even have a portion during the class where I sign off at the bottom of the notes to make sure that you took all of the notes. Online, it's not as simple. If I'm watching you on Zoom, you might not be writing nothing.
And that's the issue. And that's part of the issue that I'm running into is I create in my classroom, I do what's called a living notebook. We are constantly doing graphic organizers and charts, and we're constantly putting things in our notebook. It's not just them sitting in front of me writing notes. We are creating a living document that they can constantly use and refer back to throughout the year. And it's all organized and all that. And, I spend a lot of time getting my kids to figure, teaching them how to set all that stuff up. And I'm missing that. I can't tell you how many times I wish I had a whiteboard in front of me and I could just write stuff down when I'm trying to explain it to them, and I could give them the visual. And it's and I thought I was pretty tech savvy. I mean, I knew I wasn't an expert, but I thought I was intermediate. I wouldn't put myself at advanced, but I didn't think I was beginner. But I'm realizing that I'm not as intermediate as I thought I was, at least not when it comes to a lot of these online programs. Now, once I learn how to do them, I'm great. I can figure stuff out. But it's the matter of being exposed to them, figuring out how to make them work, and then figuring out the best way to incorporate them into my lesson. It's just a lot. And again, I'm not complaining because it is what it is, but it's just a lot to it. It's just a lot of steps. Miss Button, Jessica said that her school district, the kids, they print out worksheets and the parents have to pick up the packets and all that. And I know a friend of mine, that's what they were doing for his daughter, her elementary school. And to be honest with you, sometimes I kind of wish they had given us that option, even though I'm not the biggest fan of just a bunch of packets. I'm not. But there are some materials that we would do in class that I wish, like, for example, I have a whole activity that I do with my kids at the beginning of the school year on primary, secondary sources. And it's just, it's little stuff like that, because you would be surprised how many ninth graders don't know the difference. So it's little things like that I wish I could kind of do. But they haven't given us that option that as far as picking up packets. But even that could be time consuming by the time you put those packets together and stuff. But I'm not complaining. I would do it if they had given us the option.
You take for granted certain things, like just something as small as anything that you give. You have to take for granted that a child is going to tell you, "Oh, I don't have a printer." So everything has to be able to be manipulated on screen or on whatever device that they're using. So now, whereas you can say, "Well, write this down," now you have to have things made in a manner and manipulated in a way which allows that student to interact with it online. Whereas, normally it would be pen to paper and different things like that. Think about a class like math, where you're doing computations, and a lot of the computations does involve writing it down, seeing a student work through the process. Because a math teacher will tell you, "I need to see the process. I'm more concerned with your process more than I am the answer." Little things like that just make it where you got to learn, okay, what fonts lend itself to mathematical computation, because there are certain fonts that you can have that lend itself to that. So just all of those little things come into question. You then have to then think about assessments and testing, project-based learning, and all of those things. Not that they were not in place in the school system before, because I saw someone said something to that effect. However, it's always been in tandem. You don't want to just be relegated to one mechanism, because that's not how people learn. There are several methods with which students learn. There's several ways in which cognition happens. And so the fact that in a lot of cases with the Zoom meetings and with the pandemics, you are relegated to one or two methods of cognition or methods of that student being taught. What about the kinesthetic learners? What if you're that student who's more so kinesthetic, where they need manipulatives and they need to be able to touch and feel on things? What about and I'm not going to go through all of the different styles and forms of learning, but I'm just giving you examples of the fact that there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of different ways. And I saw Miss Honey, you mentioned electronic grade book, but the reason a good teacher has so many different ways to attack an assignment or ways to teach a different area is for the differentiation of instruction.
Differentiation, absolutely. There is no different. Well, I'm gonna say there isn't any. It's a lot
of all the students. You got to be able to meet the needs of all the students. And so I would venture to say that if they do a study on this school year or this time period during the pandemic, there's a lot larger percentage of students that maybe the learning curve may be leaving them behind because their needs are just not being met. We haven't even begun to grapple with and unpack the whole special ed piece of it, and the accommodations that may or may not be being met by students who need accommodations because they just can't be via, the internet.
And Young Rich, we've mentioned that a few times since this pandemic shut the schools down, that so many school districts were outdated or are outdated. So many school districts, you would think that in 2020 would be ready for remote learning or one-to-one devices or would have it. But the reality is that they just were not. And you're right, Ms. Honey, this could absolutely be a catalyst to push us to that point. Unfortunately, so many school districts I know I'm gonna speak for my school district. They keep using we're building the plane while we're flying. So much of it is they're figuring it out as they go along because there was no plan. And even though they had all summer to plan for a lot of this, there are still so many questions that just haven't been addressed. And so your point is valid. So you said upload the work via an app called Seesaw. Yeah, I've heard of Seesaw. Mm-hmm.
The other part is it becomes, my grandfather used to talk about, used to tell us all the time, you can either learn how to swim at the beach or you can learn how to swim at the pool. And what I mean by that is this. At the beach, you go from the shallow water to the not, and you get gradually to, immerse yourself in the water. When you go to the public pool to learn how to swim, you know what they do? They throw you in the 20-foot deep pool and say, just try and swim before they finally teach you the strokes and stuff like that. But they just throw you in the deep end. And so it feels like they're throwing the whole education system in the deep end in a lot of districts, as opposed to having them at the beach where you say, okay, this year we want you to implement this. Next year, we're going to take you a little deeper. You're going to implement that. The following year, where maybe you had a 2 or 3 year progressive plan to get education there, as opposed to just saying, oh, we just going to throw y'all in the deep end. And so when you do that, throw it in the deep end, not only are the teachers affected, meaning the education process is affected. So now you're affecting the students and their learning that's actually taking place. It's a lot that goes into it.
It is a lot. And Miss Honey, let me tell you something about that electronic notebook. Listen, I was going to set up an electronic notebook for my students. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. And I'm not saying I still won't do it. I'm just saying it's a lot. Mm-hmm. Now, once you get it set up, okay, great. But listen, it's a lot.
And then what you got to think about, too, is you talk about a regular high school teacher who could have anywhere from the low end in my old districts or all of the districts I've been in. On the low end, you could have 125 students. On the high end, you could have upwards of close to 200 students. Imagine that many electronic grade books that you have to check for any one assignment. And that's just one assignment.
Listen, it's a lot. And again,
daunting. It can become very
and again, I don't want to come off that I'm complaining, but I need y'all to understand that there's no easy solution. No, there's no perfect answer. There's no easy solution. I do want to clear something up. Young Rich, I think you're confusing students who have mental illness with students who have special needs. A student who is blind or can't talk or is mute or can't walk, that doesn't equal mental illness. They have a learning disability or they may have a disability, but that doesn't equal mental illness. But I understand the point I think you're trying to make. I just want to clear that up. I don't want to confuse the two. Okay, hold on. I'm getting caught up on the statements here. Give it 2 years and assess students who are in K1 and they're in. We'll see you know what? Anybody that's wanting to write a dissertation, listen. The next 2 years, there's
Mhm.
going to be so many studies done. There's going to be so much data. There's going to be listen, there's going to be so much
And
out
in
there.
most states, in almost every state, that third grade is accountability grade. Almost every state you can think of, third grade is accountability grade because they want to know and they want to be able to. Now, people, your conspiracy theorists, people are going to start to talk about prison pipelines and all of that stuff streaming from third grade. You hear a lot of that, and that's a real thing too. That's a whole nother argument. But what I'm saying is, that third grade snapshot or accountability lets you know where that student is cognitively, how they learn, where their deficiencies are, and it's going to stay with them and carry them forward through the higher grades. So it's going to be, if you have a child in K1 right now, these are scary times because you are just starting to know and understand how that child learns, their method and style of learning, cognition. The whole term metacognition is going to be like, oh my God, in 2 or 3 years, like Dan said. Very curious.
Okay. Okay. Valid, absolutely valid. Miss Honey, that's a really good question. So here's what I'm gonna say about the difference between what's going on now and online schools. A couple of differences. One, an online school is set up for that. That's the plan. That's the foundation. That's what it is.
Mhm.
The second, a child who signs up for the online school is prepared. They have the laptop, they have the Wi-Fi, they have the printer, it's a system that has already been set up. And the third thing that I'm going to say is that just like with anything else, not all online schools are successful. That doesn't mean it can't work for different strokes, different folks. There are some people that is a very successful program for. But I told you guys when I was working at the jail and we had a kid who was being homeschooled, and when she got there, she didn't even know her password. She didn't even know her login. You know why? Because her mother had been doing her work. So,
the thing about it is with virtual schools have been in most school systems for some time now. For some time, they already, like my colleague said, they already had a plan in place. The other thing about it is the students that voluntarily, and I'm going to use that word, voluntarily, signed up to be a part of virtual school knew what they were signing up for. They knew what the program was like. If it worked for them, they stayed and they flourished. If it did not work for them, then a lot of them got out of it. Now, I said voluntarily because there are areas like, for example, in Florida. In Florida, if a student fails a class, they do get the option so that they're not they don't have to necessarily repeat a school year. They do have the option to do that course the following year or maybe that summer through virtual school. And their counselor can sign them up for virtual school. The problem with that is students find out really quickly that they're not ready for that in a lot of cases, because a lot of that is self-guided, self-directed, where it's more so like a college online course. The teacher puts up the syllabus, they put up the assignments that you're going to do, they make themselves available during these times of the day, on these days of the week, where a student can call them or interact with them online and get help. But for the most part, 75 to 80% of their course is self-directed from the student. And I don't know what the percentages are for students that can deal with that, but I would venture to say a lot of students right now are being thrown into that, and that's not what they can deal with.
Right. Couple of good things, you guys. So Discovering Des, who is a special education teacher, he said that the requests have already started to spike, and I'm gonna come back to that. El Teddy, remind me of the story I told you earlier this week about the email I got from a parent. And then Discovering Des also said the other thing to add to that is those teachers who are teaching in an online school have been trained for that, and that also makes a difference. I was never trained to teach virtually.
They already
I'm learning as I fly.
They already have the platforms in place. They have had the professional development so that they can learn how to deal with it, interact with those platforms. Like all of those systems are in place, but the system was not built to have the number of or the percentages of students and teachers on the virtual platform that we have now, or that are being forced to deal with that now because of the pandemic.
And Young Rich, that's not a dumb question. I can only tell you what my school policy is. If a student, first of all, our sessions are recorded. I had a situation to be the first week of school. That was a whole nother story. But if there is an issue where a teacher has to put a child out of class due to behavior or disruption or whatever, our policy is that the child is not allowed to come back into class until there's a meeting with the parent. Because again, we have the documentation, the sessions are recorded. So there's no question about what your child did or did not do. So yeah, your child is put out of class, they're kicked out of the Zoom, and they're not allowed back.
Can you drop the link?
Oh, sure. And they're not allowed back in until there's a meeting with the parents. So yeah, no.
Go ahead. That I don't. These are things that unfortunately a lot of school districts and a lot of administrations did not plan for, only because it was still fluid on whether or not school districts were going to go back. It was still fluid on and dynamic and not static on what was going to actually happen with regard to in-person schools. If you remember this summer, as I was reading all of those states, it was changing week to week. And so there wasn't enough time sometimes to put the disciplinary processes in place, action plans, and so forth. And so now you do have some administrations and some school districts that are doing it as you go situation. They're addressing the needs in terms of discipline as situations arise. And unfortunately, I think that parents and students and teachers alike have to be cognizant of that it's nobody's fault where we are, and we have to make exceptions, and we have to allow for things to be fluid and change.
Real quick, I'm about to bring on Des. Button Jessica, I'm sorry. We as educators tend to speak in acronyms sometimes. SPED is special education. We do it all the time. We do it to each other. We tend to speak in our acronyms. So yes, SPED is special
education. ESL is English.
Right, or ESOL. Yeah.
Or ESOL.
And you don't even want to get Des talking about all his acronyms.
Right. Got like 8,000 acronyms.
I have a resource of shorthand to refer back to. It's really a lot. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say hey before jumping in, really.
No, thanks for joining. And for those who are new, who don't know, this is Discovering Des. He is also a creator. Y'all go check his channel out. But he is also a wonderful educator, and he teaches our special education students. And so he has a whole different challenge, and his challenge is even different from my challenge as far as the pandemic is concerned. Because going back to the point you were making, Young Rich, the kids who already been identified as special education, we know they've already been identified that they have challenges in a traditional school setting. Yeah. And so, it makes it even a lot harder when you can't put I don't mean violently, but you can't put your hands
Right.
So go ahead, Des, you have the floor, sir.
I'll just say that it has been a very interesting transition, returning back to work and actually having to go back on campus, because like most schools, around March 16th, we went home and whatnot, and then transitioned into, I guess you'd say, a virtual school. I wouldn't really count it as a virtual school. It was more of a temporary model, in my opinion. But it was interesting having to deal with that, and also dealing with life in quarantine. It was just a really big adjustment, because when you think about teaching, you're around a lot of people throughout the day.
Yeah.
So that was a real big adjustment for me. But now moving into the new year, this is my third year teaching fifth grade special ed. Uh, it's been a turbulent year already. Like it's really you have a story every day. You
You know
have a
what,
Oh, I'm
story
sure.
every day.
Des, and I almost hate it for you because normally that third year is where you kind of get your legs underneath you.
And it's like sometimes I got it, but
Yeah,
then
and
somebody come
so
along and
Yeah.
punch me
that's
in my
when I start to
face.
feel like, okay, I can handle this. I'm getting in the groove, and
Yeah,
that's all thrown topsy turvy because of the
absolutely.
pandemic, where all of us are, pushed into first year teaching mode because
Yep.
everybody's
Yeah.
learning again, and
Yeah.
everybody's
I
learning
know.
how to do discipline over
Right.
the internet and how to create lessons over the internet and instruct over there. So
Yeah.
everybody turned back
And
in
then they
Right.
put so many
a
things
new
on you,
teacher.
like we can't make the kids come on camera, so I don't even know if my kids are there or not.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
Like, it ain't nothing like when you dismiss the class and everybody log off and it's like one kid that's still in there.
Right.
You're like, hello, because you know that means that for whatever reason they are not at their computer anymore.
Right.
Whatever
Right.
reason, and of course then they email you 20 minutes later with this excuse. I was in the bathroom. I was doing this. I didn't know. But child, I had a kids. Literally. But so let me tell you this story.
You won't be ignorant, Jonathan.
No, go ahead.
No, it's not. That's what we're here for. We are here to answer the questions, and none of them are ignorant questions because if
Right.
you don't know, you don't know.
It is an open floor.
So let me tell you this story while Jonathan is typing his question. So I got an email last week or earlier this week. I think it was El Teddy. Was it earlier this week? I think it was.
I think it was end of last
Maybe
week.
it was last week. So I got an email from a parent, Des, and the email said, dear Miss So-and-so, since the pandemic, and I've been working with my daughter, I noticed she's struggling with a lot of the material. And so I've now requested that she be tested because she needs a lot of extra support. Now, this is a 9th grade student. And the first thing I said to El Teddy was, how many teachers told you your child needed help? Whether they said it that bluntly or not. How many times were you told that your child, but because you've been working with your child since the pandemic, because she said in the email, since the pandemic. So since you've been working with your child, now all of a sudden your child is in 9th grade and you want her tested for special ed. But I didn't tell you this part, El Teddy. That after I got that email, my kids took a quiz, right? She got a 100 on the quiz. Who you think took the quiz? Who do you think took the quiz? I said, wait a minute.
Oh God! How was her academic history looking? Like, has she had struggles in the past, or was it just now the onset of virtual learning?
I think she already had academic problems. When I pulled her 8th grade data, it wasn't great. But again, you can't really look at the 8th grade data because last year was so crazy.
Right.
So you can't really, because there was no comparison. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not as valid as
like the last data point was spring. Like that's a big gap of time in education time. You're not gonna compare the fall semester to the last winter. Yes, you'll look at the fall and then look at how they change from spring to spring. But that's an odd
I have her fall
snapshot,
snapshot, but I don't have anything past that.
Right.
Most schools district, the last real good snapshot they had was that midpoint, like midpoint assessments. That's the last real good snapshot because a lot of districts around that February, March time getting ready to have that last snapshot before statewide assessments and things like that.
We were going to have our district assessment 3 or 4 weeks after.
We didn't have any spring testing, nothing.
And it's weird because like that's what you're pushing for every year.
Yep. So Jonathan,
when you say BED, do you mean behavior emotionally disturbed or
Y'all see, we
Order.
immediately, said
Right, because
because we the acronym.
one, there's a lot of acronyms.
Yeah.
Two, they change.
Mm-hmm. Because
They
it used to be EBD. I think it used to be EBD back in the day.
the categories and the labels, they move around so much,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all chasing a dollar sign a lot of the time.
Listen, do you know how many due process hearings we about to see?
Yeah, we've been trying to prepare ourselves.
I can't even imagine. And due process is when it is a remedy for a parent when they feel like their child who has been identified as having a special need and has an IEP, an individual education plan, when those needs aren't being met legally, when the school does not meet the legal mandate of a child who's been identified, right?
Yeah.
So the due process is the parent's remedy. Contrary to popular belief, a parent doesn't win money. A parent wins more resources, more services. Now, you can file class action lawsuits, and that gets into a whole nother. DC was under
and a lot of times what ends up happening is those students end up getting pushed along, because a lot of times the parents, they just want the child to pass on to the next grade. They really a lot of times are not as concerned about the learning that's taking place. They just want to make sure that child is pushed along to the next grade. I'm not saying all, but in a lot of cases that is the case. And so a principal or a school district will go to that teacher and tell that teacher, oh, you're going to change this grade because we don't have this kind of time, effort, or energy. Because then that comes with a lot of fines for the school district, because you done violated federal laws and all kinds of stuff. So
IDEA will put on your earth.
When I worked in DC was under receivership for almost my whole tenure in DC. There was a major special education lawsuit called Blackman Jones. You may be familiar, Des. If you guys are not, look it up. And it was a class action suit that was filed against DC public schools. And as a result, there were so many things that DC had to do for a certain amount of time. And until then, they were under the mandate of Blackman Jones. Let me tell you how many lawyers got rich. Because see, the lawyers get paid, the parents get paid, the lawyers get paid, and there was so many there was so many lawyers who opened up these educational, law offices because every time a parent said, "My child didn't get enough paper clips," well, we're filing a due process. We're going to court because
there was
under that receivership, and it was an automatic thing. If it wasn't happening, it was like, boom, well, your child is going to get a private tutor. They were giving away laptops. You would have parents call and be like, how do I get a laptop? Because they heard from their cousin, sister, uncle, friend. My child got to get a laptop.
We haven't had anything like that, but we did have a case locally, like the next town over. We had a mom sue the school a couple years back. I want to say 2011, 2012. About her son's services and lack thereof, and what she had went and had outside services provided. He was on the autism spectrum, and it was they won a significant amount of money back, and she then became an advocate. And she is a very strong advocate.
I am reading between those lines.
So that was my first. No, wait a minute. Let me go back. She did that a couple years ago. Go back to Jonathan's question about behavioral. Yes, that does cover that. My first year, I had a very interesting behavioral case, and that person had an advocate. So I've dealt with all of that, and that was my first year. So that was a lot.
And in a lot of cases, you will see they will put some of the behavioral or emotionally disturbed students in with self-contained with some of the true learning disabilities. Right. Now you have this child that could truly be gifted, and truly cognitively be well advanced and in the same class with somebody who has a learning disability, and because that child is not receiving the education or is not receiving the level of education that they need, now you are heightening their emotional or behavioral issues that they, because they're bored, and so now they're looking for any opportunity to disturb the classroom. Oh, it becomes an entire issue. But then you have to think about the other side of it. Do I put this emotionally or behaviorally disturbed child in with the regular students? And the first time somebody says boo at them, now the whole classroom is torn up.
Yeah.
And so now,
yeah, a lot of that falls under
these things.
Yeah, a lot of that falls under that another one of those acronyms, least restrictive environment. You might hear people saying,
good old LRE.
LRE, the least restrictive environment, meaning if a child, so for example, a child might be self-contained, meaning they're in a classroom of just students who have similar disabilities for every class except for PE, because they can go to PE. So now you have that one kid who's out once a day or twice a day, and again, that varies. It's different, but you might have a kid that's only in they call it a resource room with us. They might only be in a resource.
That's what they call it.
That's what I do.
They may only be in a resource for math, and so the rest of the day they're in their general education classes, whether they really should be or not.
Right. And then that gets into the minutes served and all of that. Given that my school is a charter school, we have to be very good with our paperwork and stay accountable and logging our times and all of that. We're that kind of school. So I do a lot of paperwork. So that's why I'm thankful this year. Most of my students are served in the resource setting. And not like the inclusion setting where I have to teach with another teacher and co-teach. But again, I was going to say, thinking about what happened with coronavirus, the virtual school model, we're having to create different service plans to provide them with those service minutes outside of their IEP. So we write their IEP so that they have minutes listed on there as if they were going to school. But then we have an amendment that dictates their minutes in the hybrid or virtual model that they have chosen, which they have the freedom to go back and forth on.
To answer your question about that lighting situation, Jonathan, in all of the school districts that I've seen, you're not going to have any of that, because then you get into the issue of lighting, whether or not a student can see, and a lot of mandates that you have with regard to school systems are a blanket that is supposed to meet the needs of the masses and not the individuals. So in terms of dimming lighting, most times that's going to be in the case of maybe you got a projector up, or you got something smart board or something like that. But for the most part, you are doing any dimming like that for that, because you may get into situations where a child that needs glasses may say, I can't see if you dim the lights. Even me as a teacher, students complain about me as an English teacher saying, why do I have to write in pen? But my complaint is, when you write in pencil, a lot of times, if I have a bunch of pieces of paper and the pencil is next to each other, they start to slide and it starts to fade. I can't read some of that stuff. I tell students only write on one side of the paper, because if you have the wrong kind of pen, it's going to bleed through and I can't see, the front the back. And the students only thinking about themselves, not thinking about the fact that I have to deal with 185 students and I have to read 185
papers. And I do the same thing. They're not allowed. I was always the first school I worked in, which was a middle school, but at the time it was one of the best middle schools in DC at the time. The only time students were allowed to use pencil was science and math class. They were, as a school rule, they were not allowed to use pencil in any class.
Listen, South Carolina, the parents would riot. They are not going to take being micromanaged.
And see, the thing about it is too, and one thing I tell parents when we have open house, I tell a parent, when you come to the school, and I taught general ed, so I could make this announcement. Unless your child has an IEP, you have to understand that rules and procedures and policies are in place for all students.
For all students,
Year
absolutely.
one. Because you are thinking about year one,
Yeah.
and I have to think about 185. The school has to think about 2,500. And you might be thinking about one or two, and so you cannot come to a school or my classroom expecting me to bend the rules and policies on your two when I have 185. I don't even just have the 35 that are in that class period.
Right, exactly.
I got multiple class period.
And with me being at a school of choice, like we can be a little bit more flexible with that. We're like, if you're not gonna follow X, Y, and Z, then you're gonna have to go back to your home school. So discipline is interesting. That just in my observation, discipline is interesting.
I get it. Listen, and I've worked in both, so I understand the difference.
I know what because I know exactly what, because I've dealt with both too. But I do know also, even though they've changed some of the rules statewide now, in high schools now, we used to go do it in middle school. We still hold over their head. Hey, boo, you got 3 days before you turn 16. Keep playing, and we will withdraw you from school and tell you to go to adult education because you're 16 now. We don't got to keep you here.
Listen,
Shawana, that's not an accommodation. Those are your services. I suggest you go talk about that. If y'all haven't got that cleared up yet, I would suggest handling that quick.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, you need to contact the special education office for your school district. I don't even know if I would call the school. Well, I would call the school.
Right.
I mean, if you've already talked to the school and it's not happening, I would go to the office, wherever the special education office is. That's who I would contact tonight. I would send an email tonight. So whoever need to get it first thing Monday or Tuesday morning.
I can't imagine me doing that. That's funny. I cannot imagine not knowing somebody's on my caseload and not seeing them for 2 weeks. That would blow my mind.
I've seen it before. I've been and I'm sure really you probably know, being that general ed teacher, you're supposed to have an inclusion teacher, and they don't show up for 2 or 3 weeks. Talk about, I was over here doing IEPs for 3 weeks. I'm
very good. I try to stick to my schedule. I have my schedule laid out. It's a lot.
In 3 weeks.
Listen, no offense, Des.
Here's my accommodations.
Listen, no offense, Des, to your people, but that's the quickest. Don't they use that one? I was at an IEP. I had to write an IEP.
Don't do us. Don't do us. I was getting these logs turned in. Right. Y'all late with them anyway.
What's so funny is,
especially in that spring semester when the IEPs come due, honey.
I just finished my first new evaluation of the year. His meeting is in a couple weeks.
No. I was the general ed teacher. I was English department chair, but I was also department chair for ESOL and ESL. So we had to do all of the paperwork for that as well. Yep. So when people used to come at me talking about stuff, I would do IEP. I said, girl, I ain't trying to hear you. I got my own paperwork to do, but I got to be in this class every day.
Okay. Listen, Miss Honey said she dated teachers in the past. She said y'all ain't never on time for dinner.
No, I don't take work home. No, I might be tired when I get home, but I'm not doing too much work.
Listen, I learned. Let me tell y'all this.
I learned that later on in my career. It was
I knew from day one I wouldn't get.
I did. Now that was something I had to learn too. My first year teaching, one of my mentor teachers, and I think I told this story before. I will never forget Geraldine Armstrong. Okay, she was Geraldine. She was fly. Okay, Geraldine. Yes, ma'am. She was fly. Okay,
I love it.
Her and her husband were high school sweethearts. They were from St. Lucia. Both of them came over here to go to Howard University. She was a teacher. He was a doctor. Oh. And I mean, she did stuff like came back from Christmas when she already had a Benz. Remember the first year that the Benz truck came out? We came back from Christmas. She had one. It was sitting in her driveway Christmas morning with a bow on it. Okay. So I remember my first year teaching. She used to stroll. And when I say stroll, we got off work at 3:15. At 3:20, she was strolling to her car with her Louis Vuitton clutch over her shoulder. And I said to her, on her arm, I said, and here I am struggling with 4 and 5 bags, I'm leaving work at 5:30. And
If it don't fit in here, it don't come home.
I
If
said,
it don't fit in
when
here,
I
it
grow
don't
up,
come home.
I said when I grow up, I want to be like you, honey. By my 3rd year teaching, I was walking right along with her at 3:30. I was right there with her. It ain't take me long, but honey, listen.
Right.
Listen.
IEP is a individualized education plan.
She said, what is an IAP?
She
Is
said,
it an
or
action plan?
No, I
She said,
think she
or
was meaning IEP.
Oh, she said, okay, I'm sorry. Ooh, Lord, my eyes. Okay.
I was like, that must be a new one.
Right. Have you ever had a student that had been in SPED in grade school but didn't need those accommodation college to succeed? Yeah.
I'll tell you from having taught on the college level, very few students continue with those accommodations on the college level.
And the reality is they can until they're 21. But you have to you have to be very proactive. When you get to college, you have to seek out and you have to be very proactive with what your accommodations are, your IEP. But it's still after 21. It's not.
And then on the college level, the accommodation becomes the duty of that student and no longer the teacher. Right. Whereas,
I just say that.
You didn't say that like that.
I did just say that.
No, you didn't.
Did I not just say that the teacher, that it falls on the student and the student has to be proactive?
What I mean by that is this: you said it falls on the student in terms of them making sure that they inform them. What I'm saying is,
I'm talking about all of it falls on the student.
And that's why, like, since mine are in 5th grade, 5th grade is that little more. You almost in middle school, but not quite, and. It's like I have to I've always since day one, my first year, I was like, no one's gonna know you need help unless you let them know. Because you gotta learn to let people know what you need and be very transparent because we are here for you. I'm very strong about that.
In college, you don't have differentiated instruction, you have differentiated learning. Baby, you got to change your learning style. Baby, professor,
you have to be flexible.
Okay. So, young Rich, you asked a question a few minutes ago, and I never got to it, but I'm gonna finish it up because we get ready to get out of here. But you asked if No Child Left Behind is no longer enacted, and what I'm gonna say is this: it still exists, but a lot of the policies of No Child Left Behind have been suspended or not being enforced. Now, does it still exist? Yeah, it still exists. It hasn't been repealed totally, but a lot of the policies that were in place aren't being enforced right now. Do you rise at the same time as you would with the school instruction? In other words, are you having a normal day? You know what? Here's the reality, Jonathan.
She wasn't waking up on time when she was going into school.
Now you see, first of all, you're telling
if I could get those April naps back,
don't tell.
I could get those April naps back.
Okay,
man.
I can tell y'all that a lot of times that I would call really be like, really just get to this school and that first period planning, baby.
I got first period planning too. Listen, I know what's up.
Here's the thing.
I know what's up.
Why you got this from my dad in this classroom?
I got this from my dad. My dad would have a time that he wanted to be at work and a time he had to be at work. And my father would always be like, I'm running late. I'm late. And finally, because my mother always left for work before my dad. So I never knew that to be true or false. I know he used to always complain that he was late. But what I found out was if my father had to be at work at 7:30, in his mind, I got to be at work at 7. So if he was after 7, then in his mind, he was late, but he was never late for work. So that's my thing. I'm late for the time I want to be at work, but I ain't late for work. Now, I did have a few days that I used my...
You forgot you coming to me here. You forgot?
Listen,
we were on the phone a lot of these times. Don't do me.
There were a few times. A few? It wasn't that many. Don't do me. It wasn't that many. Hey, Fifi TV.
Hey, Fifi.
But as far as what time do I get up now, the reality of the situation is I probably do get up later. But because when I had to get up to go to work, I was walking out the door by 7:15. I was walking out the house by
Yeah.
7:15.
That's my
first
goal.
class, my
That's my
earliest
goal.
class is at 7:30. So I'm up by 7:15, but I'm not up dressed ready to walk out the door by 7:15 if I had to go to work. But I'm up.
Oh, I get there. We're supposed to be there at 7:30. I don't have duty, so technically I don't have an obligation first thing in the morning. So I try to walk out the door around 7:15 because I live just a couple minutes down the street. But I don't have my second period class. It's my first class of the day, and I don't start till 9:04.
Okay.
So I have a good chunk of the day to get paperwork done.
Oh yeah, you
and
got a good
whatnot.
little. But I have first period planning too, and whatever.
Crispies, you're supposed to have an IEP for every student before that first week.
Right.
Of training.
Right. And
Or
now in my
you
district,
may
we do
not
it
have a full IEP. They have a lot of times they'll give you the IEP summary.
Yeah,
The
we
summary
call it
of the
snapshots, but that's what it is. You should have had that the first day. You should
The
have had
first
that
day of
the first day of school, before the first day of school, really.
And in the snapshot or in the summary, it's going to list all of the accommodations. It may not tell you go into detail about all of the rationale and how we got to that point, like the IEP will.
Right.
But it's going to tell you what the accommodations are.
Right. And Crispies, let me say this to you as someone who used to be an advocate, and I'm sure Des can speak from the point of view of a SPED teacher. Yes, that was the responsibility of his caseworker to get that to you. But if you know you have
follow you.
If you know you have students that have IEPs, then it's gonna fall on you to be like, well, you didn't follow up and you weren't given the proper instruction. So I would
follow you. It should be a marking. I mean, every school district on your grade book, it has a little marking that lets you know students that are ESL, students that are SPED, and so that you know which students need whatever accommodation, be they English speakers or be it SPED. And once you know that your student is one of those two, those are the two big ones, ESL and SPED. Once you know you have students that.
Yep.
And if a parent has told you, especially if a parent has emailed you, or if a student has told you, you are now responsible, regardless of what the case manager did or did not do. So I would send an email tonight. I think El Teddy is
they will come knock on your door and say, come print all this shit out.
I'm telling you now. So I was send an email. I know it's Friday, but I was send
some people to talk to.
Yeah, I was send an email tonight. Send it to I would send it to the department chair, the special ed department chair. Don't throw nobody under the bus. But I would send an email to the department chair saying, hey, I haven't received any snapshots or any student IEPs. What's good?
Sometimes you got to give a little shove.
Yeah, you got to send an email and CC the right people.
Yeah, because you might not know who
person and CC the administrator over that grade level or the administrator over SPED. Hey, in the 5th week of school, and I just wanted to know when should I expect to be receiving the IEP or the list of accommodation for these students, because I have not received them yet.
Because trust me, when it's time for a due process, like I was just saying a few minutes ago, your name gonna be on the same paperwork as his case manager because you are a teacher. And I promise you, the parent don't care whether you knew or not. The school is and the last thing you want to do is walk into an IEP meeting and say you ain't know a child with special ed. Please don't ever do that. Don't.
Because guess what? I have
your job is right here.
At school. Nah, I was real anal about paperwork.
It's right here.
I was real anal about paperwork for SPED students because I was good for a SPED student, but from the first day of school, I met with my SPED students. Y'all see me after class. I ain't say why. I just said these students see me after class. After that class, I said at the end of every class period, you will come over here and I have a log where I have a page for each student of their accommodations. Please initial and date the accommodations that you received today.
Listen, I'm like, y'all, the date's on the board. Stop asking me.
Have on my documentation.
I had a checklist. I had a notebook that had all of my SPED kids, and I had a checklist. And I got this when I worked at the jail. My principal had created this, and I stole it. I said, "Oh, this is the best thing I have ever seen."
Oh yeah, sometimes you see you
find all kinds of stuff.
You hold on to that.
Yeah, and it was a checklist, and so it had the student's name. And it was dated. And there you go down the checklist. What accommodation did you do that day? And I would keep that checklist. I had a separate notebook, but whenever there was a lesson plan, I could always say what the accommodation was in that lesson plan.
Okay, it's always and see, a parent got upset with me because she thought that the accommodation had to be exclusive to the sped student. And I said, no, not so, ma'am. When I give accommodation, I'm giving accommodations to the entire class because I don't want the class to know that your child is needing accommodations. So, man, go ahead. Everybody get extended time if they request it or if they do it.
My school does that a little different. Like we have scheduled. When they schedule a test in the class in their gen ed classroom, they come to me to take that test for small group testing, or oral admin if they are so many grade levels below.
I know, and a lot of times, high school student will have to ask.
Yeah.
For those accommodations, a lot of times the student will say, "Can I go and take with so and so?" I would have already emailed their case manager and stuff like that and let them know that we have testing on this day. They would already.
Oh yeah, I have a Google Calendar. I'm like, y'all, if y'all don't submit,
but only if they ask.
If you don't submit your testing dates 3 days before, I'm gonna send a snarky message to you asking you why are their children at my door. If you didn't tell me y'all had a test today.
At my door. Exactly.
Because the thing about it is, especially on the high school level where subject areas are very specified, you have to have a real good knowledge of stuff. Yeah. A student taking a test with that case manager is not going to do them any justice because they might not be able to answer the questions or give them all of the accommodations that they need with regard to that test or the information that they should get from that.
One thing I wish people got was that special ed teachers, yes, we are there to service your student, but we specialize in intensive instruction, not specialized content of those upper grade level materials.
Now, let me ask you this, Des. Do they make in your district, do they make special education teachers get certified in a specific subject area?
No.
See, in my district and the districts that I've taught in, even if you were certified in special ed, you still had to have a content area that you were certified in, be it English or math or social, whatever your you had to have in addition to certification in special education. You also had to, so that way, if they needed for you to be an inclusion teacher, they knew you could be an inclusion teacher for X class, or if you needed to give accommodations. And so that became mandated statewide, I know, in Florida.
Yeah. All right, you guys, listen, El Teddy and I, we had this conversation. We said the conversation is probably going to flow a little bit. We were going to get into a little bit about charter versus public versus private. We spoke a little bit about charter and private school. I think somebody earlier in the chat said something about her nephew goes to a private school and they had some online classes. And the reality is because some private schools were already set up for that. My nephew, he's not my nephew, he's my little cousin. When he was in high school, he went to a private high school and he's in his third year of law school now. So you can imagine that was 8 years ago, about 7-8 years ago that, that he was in high school. They didn't even have snow days because even if the kids were home for a snow day, the expectation was that the teachers still had to send out assignments. They had a system set up like Google Classroom. It's not, I'm sure it's like Blackboard or something like that. And
I'm thankful we had that because that made that transition of getting information out a little bit easier than if you did not. If you didn't, we have Schoology. If we didn't have that, it would have been an interesting.
And that was and that was like I said, that was 7 years ago, 7-8 years ago. So some, like I said at the beginning, some schools were ready for remote learning. Most were not.
Right.
Most were not. So I say this to everybody. Please, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend, as Ebby would say. I will be going live on my personal YouTube channel in about 30 minutes, y'all. I'm starving. I haven't eaten. So I'm going to try to get wolf something down real quick. But I'll be going live at 6:30 over on my channel, El Teddy. If you are not subscribed to his personal channel.
Go live late tonight. We're going to have a boys' night out tonight.
Okay, well, listen. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother channel. Des, please check out Discovering Des. He is an educator, but he also does mukbangs and he does reaction videos and things of that nature on his channel. So check him out as well, you guys. I want to thank everybody for coming through. everybody for participating in the chat. It makes it a lot easier when you guys are asking questions and carrying on a conversation. I hope you were able to get some information. The whole purpose of this platform is for you guys to walk away with more information that can help bridge the gap between parents and educators and all of that good stuff. And we will continue to be here to help you guys walk through this whole remote learning situation. Some of us are figuring it out as we go, just like y'all.
We're hand in hand. We're hand in hand.
We'll bring you what we have. So thank y'all, and thank you, Des, for jumping on as always. You know, the platform is always open to you, and I appreciate you coming through and sharing. Because again, I know special education, but I don't teach special education. It's always different perspectives. So I thank you guys, and
it varies a lot.
With that, I'm gonna let El Teddy have the last word.
I get the last word. Thank you all for coming over, and thank you all for watching us. Please do not neglect. Send us an email if you have questions, if you have topics that you'd like for us to unpack or discuss. Please ask those questions. And I know at one point today, we did start to go a little bit into the politics of it all. And I do think that we do need to go down that road, especially with election season upon us. You know, you have school board representatives that are going to be getting to be voted for. You may go to a forum where these people are, you know, available, and you may want to be able to ask the right questions to these people. So please don't shy away from asking us things. I just thought about that really. We may want to go into, you know, a little bit of the politics behind education, because that is a large part of it. The money's involved. You know,
we could definitely get into that.
Taxes, and the all of the things that go involved with education, because I don't think we've tackled that, but that is a very important part of it. And then, as you can see, it will dictate what happens with education more so than the educational process itself.
Right.
So that's all I wanted to say.
I said I was gonna give you the last word, but I lied.
A mess.
And we are also on podcast platforms, so you can catch us on Spreaker, you can catch us on iTunes and Spotify and Google Play. So you guys going over, even though you catching us here live, go ahead and subscribe. And again, once again, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. I'm sorry, El Teddy. I apologize. I had to get that.
You don't care. You don't care about
I love you though.
I love you.
All right, y'all. I'm hitting the button.